G'day everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Ask Tom Tech Show. My name is Tom Freer and today I'm going to talk about a question I actually got asked this week when I was meeting with a prospective organisation was, do I really need to move to the cloud? So this week was an interesting question and something that I really hadn't thought about of late because it's sort of just a standard approach now. But this organisation working with that we got in to talk to were asked the question of, do I need to move everything to the cloud? I'm really worried about not owning the data anymore. And I thought, okay, that's a really interesting question because it's not something I've been asked of late, but something that probably there's still a lot of questions about, and not everyone is comfortable with that approach. So to touch on that, it's something that, yes, I think there is lots of benefit in moving your systems and processes and applications to the cloud. Now, I say that on the basis of there are certain things that you just would do. So I'll take email as an example. There is very little value for any organisation to maintain an email server in their office. You're maintaining the hardware. Obviously, you're then, if your hardware fails or your application stops, you've got no email. You're very reliant on that piece of infrastructure that sits in your office. If you don't have good power protection, good uptime, a good reliable internet service, you're not going to be able to get access to your email. It makes it a little bit more challenging then to make it mobile, and you've got to maintain more security, more components to get that to work. So email is something that is sort of almost a no-brainer where you go, yes, we're just going to move that to the cloud. But the question attached to that is, do I retain access and do I still own my data? And the short answer is yes. Just because you're moving that to the cloud, you lose the ability to maintain the server. You lose a little bit of control over the uptime of that. So moving to a major provider such as a Office 365 or a Google sort of mitigates that because of the availability times that they have. But you don't lose access to your data. It's still your data. You still retain your logins. You still have the ability, if you want to extract that data out of the cloud at any time and back it up and put it on a local machine or wherever you want to store it. You're not handing over ownership of your data by any means. What you're handing over as part of your subscription service is for someone else to maintain the back-end infrastructure that makes that service available to you. So you don't have to worry about the server that it runs on. You don't have to worry about, is my internet going to be online so my email continues to flow. You don't have to worry about the security that goes into making sure that email is accessible remotely and those type of things. You pay your subscription, you get X amount of storage, you put your data in there, your email in there, and you log into it and away you go. Yes, from your side as an organisation, you need to make sure that you can have reliable comms, but you've got a lot more flexibility around that. Your office internet isn't the sole provider of email service for you in this example. Your email can then be accessible on your phone, so on your 4G, which means you can go home and access your email. You're not reliant on anything within your office environment to deliver that email service. So that's one example of moving that. But the cloud is bigger than that, than just email. And there's some things that I know that I, as an IT provider, take a little bit for granted in that it's almost the norm now to look at how we make things enabled in the cloud and what can we use. And you're all probably familiar with cloud systems anyway. I'd say a lot of you are using accounting systems in the cloud, MyOb, Xero, those type of things. They're cloud-based systems where you're entering all your financial information into the cloud. The data's still yours. You're not handing over any of that data. You still have the ability to extract that out and back that up. You have the choice to do that, so it's still there. But where the cloud conversation really heads about whether you should or shouldn't move to the cloud comes down to what other applications and systems you are using within your business. This conversation I had recently was quite interesting because they already running their accounting system in the cloud. They're already running their operational system in the cloud. But the concern was moving their email and files to the cloud because they would potentially lose ownership of that. Well, it's no different to having your accounting and your operational system in the cloud. you're already there, and that's the bulk of your business running there. We're now talking in this instance of getting your email and your file system up there, which again, as I say, you retain control of that. You retain control of where it sits, who has access to it within your environment. It's all secured in that sense. And if you want to, you can get that out and bring it back down and move it somewhere else as you need to. Yes, there's costs involved and there's changes required to get you to that point in the cloud. And then if you want to move to a different provider or bring it back, then you've got to consider what those costs are. So making the decision to move to the cloud is a big one and shouldn't be taken lightly, but it's certainly not about giving over control of your data. The benefits far outweigh any of the perceived risks, and the risks are minimal when you're looking at the big reputable providers. So again, talking about files, well, currently it might be sitting on a server in your office, or a NAS or something like that. What are the limitations you've got of getting remote access to that? So we can take that same data set, we can restructure it slightly, and there'll be a different means of accessing it, but you can certainly move it up into the cloud. And now suddenly all that data that was locked within your office for only you to access when you're in the office or under certain conditions, such as having VPN and those type of things, you can now, if you choose, to make that data available to your entire team regardless of where they are, or regardless of what device they're coming in on. So you've now opened up so many more possibilities in your business around how people access and interact with data and what you can do. So yeah, it's certainly it was certainly something that took me back. The question, I just wasn't expecting it, having worked in this space for so long. But I thought it was something really important, and it's something that there's still a lot of questions that consumers and organisations have about the data and where that sits and who owns it. But more so, how do we actually get that there, and what are the benefits and pros and cons against it? I think you also need to consider that as you move to the cloud, that becomes an ongoing operational expense, but you've reduced a significant amount of capital expense within your business. Yes, you could go buy a server and you could upgrade that to the latest version of Windows, and you can move all your data to that, and you can continue to operate as you do today. You're paying for the server hardware, which you could finance over 3 years. You're paying for the license, so you're on that version, unless you're paying for subscription advantage and things like that. So you're on that version and you've got that environment to deal with. You've got to think about today how much capacity you're going to need tomorrow, or in 2 years, or in 3 years, when you're purchasing that server infrastructure today. So you've got to take that into consideration. So you're probably going to spend more now on that server or that storage or whatever it is to cater and guesstimate what you're going to need within the future. Whereas under the cloud model, we don't have to buy that infrastructure up front. We can subscribe to a service. We can subscribe to what we need today. We can add the users that we're going to get tomorrow or in 6 or 12 months time when they come on, and pay for them then, not think about and guesstimate up front. So as our storage needs increase, we can increase the storage. As your business changes, you can change the way that cloud application works and be a lot more flexible in your approach. Whereas with the server environment that you're hosting either in your office or in a co-location center or something like that, you limit that flexibility. Now, saying all this, not everything is going to work well in the cloud. And there's still legacy applications and systems that probably may not work in a cloud environment or a traditional cloud environment. So you might have to consider having a server of sorts and where that sits. And it might not be a physical server, it may still be a cloud server in the traditional sense of a Windows server sitting there delivering an application. So you have that flexibility, but you need to take that in consideration as you go through that planning phase. But there are certainly, and again, in the right environment, you're not going to lose control of that data. And I think that's a really important piece. Yes, you will have that operational and ongoing investment in the licensing and the subscription fees and the hosting fees and those type of things. But the benefits that come with that are newer versions. As they're released, you have access to them. Enhancements that are being built into these platforms on a daily basis by the providers. And we look at the Microsoft suite as a really big example, the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 suite. The amount of development that Microsoft are putting into that platform is ridiculous, and the features and the functions and the security and everything that goes into it is far more than what you would ever do locally within your environment. So there is that. And you're seeing those features. Yes, there's a little bit of overwhelm of what to use at times, but they're there to have a look at, to do and apply in your business when it's applicable. And you don't have to then go and buy another license or buy another piece of infrastructure or whatever it is. So there is that, and that's really important to keep in mind as part of this. So your subscription is not just accessing the version today, but it's getting you access to the enhancements, the improvements, the new updates, the new software as it comes out from these providers. And Microsoft is the example that I'm using here. So yes, I think the answer to the question is, should I be moving to the cloud, is yes, definitely. Am I going to lose control of my data? No, you don't lose any control. You don't lose any ownership of that data. That is your data. And anyone that's saying that if you own the data regardless of where you put it, you've got to obviously look at where you're doing it and how you're doing it. But on the reputable providers, you're paying a service to host that data there. You are able to get that data out. There'll be means and process to do it. You own the data. So working with the right platforms and the right partners, you have that flexibility. Yes, there might be agreements and terms that need to be met as part of whatever that engagement is, but doing it right and planning that up front, you're going to have that flexibility long term. There are things you're still going to need to do within your office environment to make sure that your office and your staff can still access that. So you're going to have good internet, so solid and reliable, and potentially a backup internet link there, because if your internet goes down, you lose access to all of that. But again, if your internet in the office goes down, you've got the ability to connect on a hotspot or something and get access to it still. You need to make sure that your internal networking infrastructure is right. So are people connecting at the right speed? Have they got good solid Wi-Fi in your office? So within the office, they're mobile. If they are plugging into the wall, they're using desktops. Is the cabling, is the networking infrastructure right? You still need to consider firewalls and security on your side, because you want to make sure you're controlling and managing and being able to see what's happening within that office environment. And that may or may not be a physical device, but there's firewall control, so you can control and secure what people are doing. But yes, the short answer is yes. I think the cloud is something that everyone should be considering, and it's almost like a cloud first strategy should be taken into consideration. How am I going to use the cloud to leverage technology to get more for my business, more for my users? So yeah, definitely. Yes, move to the cloud. No, in the right circumstances, you're not going to lose control, and you're certainly not going to lose ownership of that data. But look, happy to have a chat and a conversation about it. But I thought I wanted to answer that question today for you all. Thank you.